Okay. So, do you guys know what rhetoric is?
Word is familiar.
No. You're supposed to know. You've learned this in school.
No.
So, rhetoric is it's basically persuasion through writing. So, like if you're doing a persuasive essay, you have your argument, you write a thesis statement, and then you support your argument with evidence throughout your paper. Have you ever done that before? Okay,
Yes.
That's rhetoric. So within rhetoric, writers employ 3 techniques that are called logos, ethos, and pathos. And they use these 3 techniques to perform or represent logic and reason, their credibility with ethos, and to play to the emotion of the reader via pathos. So some examples of this for each one could be, the main techniques basically are structure of speech for logos, references to data like statistics and studies and things like that, and then comparisons, analogies, and metaphors to help the people who are reading your paper understand it better. And with ethos, the writers use personal branding, like explaining, okay, I'm a doctor in such and such field. I've studied for this long and I have a degree in whatever. And that helps with their credibility. They also show confidence in their writing, and they provide credible sources so that when they're representing their data, you know that it's from a credible source, so you know it's an accurate source. With pathos, they play on the emotion of the reader. They tell stories to help them understand better. They use inspirational quotes, and they also use vivid language to evoke emotion and create imagery and things like that. So what I wanted to do, I have a speech that was given by President Reagan, Ronald Reagan, and it's the speech he gave after the Challenger space shuttle exploded. And we're going to read it together and then try to find examples of ethos, pathos, and logos that he used in his speech. So, do you guys want to share this one? You can have that one. So let's just read it together, and then as we're going, if you notice President Reagan using logos, ethos, or pathos, then stop whoever's reading, and then we'll talk about it. So, who wants to go first? Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union, but the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. I think that's pathos right there, isn't it? Emotion?
Yeah.
Right there already.
That's a good
Because he's
example.
trying to show that he feels for what happened already, and he's changed his whole outlook on what's going on in his life already has changed because of the events.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's a perfect example.
Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground, but we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this, and perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle, but they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison and Zuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe. Sorry about that. We mourn their loss as a nation together. For the families of the 7, we cannot bear, as you do, the full impact of this tragedy, but we feel the loss and we're thinking about you so very much. Your loved ones were daring and brave, and they had that special grace, that special spirit that says, give me a challenge and I'll meet it with joy. They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover the truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us.
Alright, anything anybody wants to bring up of what Mark read?
Well, he refers back to the previous things that happened, like talking like the history of the space program. So he's giving them like the facts and the like his credible sources, I guess. So that's the ethos. Like he's just saying, look, I'm paying attention to what's happening. I know that this is happening, and so that makes you, as you're listening, feel confidence in the president and what he's saying during that time of sadness.
Good, yeah. Gavin, do you have anything?
I think also, along with the rest of it that he read, would also mix in with Pathos as well as Ethos, because they're both stories and sources and credibility. And so it just kind of like has inspirational quotes along with the sources, and so it just kind of is like a mix of those two at the same time.
He showed credibility and because he lived through the previous accident. He remembers it as part of his life.
Right.
Like he's experienced a similar thing in the space race and stuff. So.
Alright, good. Alright, Gavin, you want to read next?
We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us, but for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forgot that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it is hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future and will continue to follow them. How much did you want me to read?
As far as you want.
I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happened today does nothing to diminish it. We don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all up in front and in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, and more teachers in space. Nothing ends here. Our hopes and journeys continue.
So that part about the civilians in space, on the Challenger shuttle there was a teacher that went with them who also died in the explosion. Does anybody have any examples of Ethos, Pathos, and Logos that they saw in those paragraphs that Gavin read?
Well, I think the pathos, because of like the vivid language where he's talking about them being brave and, you know, they're expanding our horizons and they're, you know, creating the future and we're pioneers. They all invoke like a very specific feeling and a specific images in your mind of what the space program is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes you like, anyway, the language also brings forth the emotions of like pride in our country for the things that we're doing to better ourselves during that time in the history of the space program.
Well, you can tell that he's trying to lead. What he's trying to say is, okay, this happened, we feel bad, we've been a part of this before, we can move forward, even though bad things happen, we can overcome them. And he's basically trying to let you know that we're going to continue, even though bad things could happen again. And he's just basically leading you forward, and basically he's going to say, probably in the next little bit, that yeah, we're going to keep doing the space race because it's important and it represents what we as Americans are. We're pioneers, we're risk takers, we're trying to become better people.
Good, yeah. Alright, Mom, you want to finish off?
I want to add that I wish I could talk to every man and woman who works for NASA or who worked on this mission and tell them, your dedication and professionalism have moved and impressed us for decades, and we know of your anguish. We share it. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and a historian later said, he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was like Drake's, complete. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us by the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them nor the last time we saw them this morning as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
Definitely a lot of pathos in that one. There's many inspirational quotes, like from Sir Francis Drake and whoever said these ones at the bottom about the slipped surly bonds of earth.
Good. You could also use the reference to
Yeah,
Sir
to the
Francis
data.
Drake to data. To what? What?
I
Is that
said
what you're getting at?
references to the data, like things that happened in the past and
Right.
comparing them. You know, at the time when he was the explorer, no one knew what was on the other side of the ocean, you
Mhm.
know, and it was a scary unknown thing, just like now,
Yeah.
or back when they were doing this. And he just was sharing that, you know, we did it then and we can do it now and we're going to be better even because of this tragedy. We're going to learn from it and go forward. And
Right. Yeah, it's a great comparison to the space race. So, one thing I did want to bring up is, how do we know that everything he's saying is credible? Like, from an ethos perspective, how do we know that Ronald Reagan is credible with what he's saying?
because he's the president,
Yeah.
or he was.
Yeah, it's as simple as
He's
that.
an authority figure.
Right, yeah, and so right away, even just reading the title of the speech and who said it or who wrote it, we can already start thinking, oh, this is credible just based on who he is and the reason that he came up with why he started this speech. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before we move on?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to, within the next week or so, as you're watching TV or as you're reading books or whatever, just try to look for ethos, pathos, and logos in the media that you consume, and then we'll talk about it and try to bring up some examples in a later class period.
You're gonna have to leave that whiteboard up though.
Okay. All right.